Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show, Science Dispatch Podcast, episode 70-something. I forget. I just had a kid. I don't even remember the number.
You don't have to know anything other than to get up and feed the child if that is required of you at this time.
That is exactly correct. That is the priority of my life these days. My name is Cameron English, of course, your host as always. That gentleman over there, Dr. Chuck Dinnerstein, Director of Medicine at the American Council on Science and Health. Chuck, yeah. It's good to see you. Of course, I've had a major hiccup in my schedule, as we just alluded to, so it's been a minute. How are you? How are things?
I'm fine. Happy almost Cinco de Mayo.
Yes. Yeah, you have celebrations lined up?
Oh, yes. You know, it's a very interesting world, yes. So, yes, I do have activities lined up.
Very good. Very good. So there's some Coronas in your future, it sounds like.
There's some Coronas, maybe a taco or two. We're all good.
That is the high point of life, everybody. Okay. Well, Chuck finishes up his Cinco de Mayo plans. Let's talk about a little science. We've got an interesting article here, Chuck, that you wrote a while back. This is called Should We Fear the Sun or Sun Protection? So let me read this introduction, and then you dive in here and tell us what's going on. So, as we bask in the anticipation of spring, a familiar cautionary whisper resurfaces, the age-old advice about the perils of too much sun exposure. Should we fear the sun? From its benefits and risks to the complexities of sunscreens and UV protective clothing, an informed and balanced approach to sun exposure is our best bet. Okay, break this down for us, Dr. Dinnerstein.
Okay, as always. So, this came up as an interesting topic during our weekly writers conference, and somebody brought up the question that there is now a whole line of sun protective clothing available, which is what led to looking at the article, or at least to writing the article, excuse me. And so we begin by pointing out that ultraviolet light can cause damage to our DNA, and that damage can result in the development of cancerous growths. The one that's probably most common is a squamous cell cancer, because that's on the surface of the skin. Below that layer, the basal layer of the skin, people will have basal cell carcinomas, which is less frequent. And then the least frequent of all, but probably the most dreaded, are melanomas, which are formed in the melanocytes, the cells that are in our skin that give it its various hues. So there's been a lot of attempts at developing sunscreens, though there is a very large cultural component to getting a tan or not. Back in the 1800s, when work was considered more demeaning, especially outside work, the wealthy tried to make sure that they were very pale and that didn't have any sun exposure at all to virtue signal their elevated status. Then, fast forward 100 years into the mid 20th century, and now leisure time had come into its own, and the wealthy went about with golden tans. You have to think about George Hamilton tanning himself, because then social status was conferred by having the free time and leisure to develop a tan. In any event, there are a number of chemical and physical filters to protect us from the sun's rays, or to cut down on our exposure. The chemical ones all tend to absorb ultraviolet radiation, and in the process, they give off a little bit of heat, which we don't recognize because we're already out in the sun, but in the process of absorbing the UV rays, they take out the harmful ones. They are actually, in that sense, are acting as a physical barrier, though the barrier is through a chemical reaction. And those are some of the compounds that when we talk about suntan lotions that are in that, although suntan lotions also will contain physical barriers, predominantly titanium dioxide and zinc oxide, which act in a very similar way as the chemicals present in terms of causing a chemical reaction with the UV rays and knocking them out. The studies have been going back and forth about whether it's protective. There does seem to be some evidence that the use of sunscreen on a daily basis, especially to people that are spending a lot of time outdoors, is protective against all these cancers. Now, the thing that prompted this look was protective clothing. And protective clothing has any number of ways that it may protect you from the sun. The primary way it does it is by the tightness in the weave of the fabric. If you're wearing a denim jacket, no sun will get through. Though why you'd wear a denim jacket at the beach when it's 90 degrees is another question. So looser weave material that allows to breathe, that is more comfortable, can enhance protection by making use of dyes that act in the same way as the chemicals and afford some UV protection. Or interestingly enough, the addition of some brighteners, which radiate the sun back out. And that's the findings. Overall, in the end, if you're going to spend a great deal of time, it's worth using some kind of suntan lotion, though the truth of the matter is that very few of us apply it as directed, which is multiple times over the course of the day. So under the Swiss cheese theory of safety, it's probably better to use some kind of suntan lotion along with some kind of t-shirt or light shirt to protect yourself.
Ah, yes. The Swiss cheese theory of all medicine. I feel that is going to become ever more prevalent as time goes on. Okay, so there's a couple of interesting facets to this that I wanted to ask you about. One of the first, and maybe I'm throwing you a curveball here, but last year there was sort of a hubbub around an American politician that everyone knows as AOC, who I don't know if she pressured the FDA or she made public comments saying, countries around the world like the European Union or South Korea, they have access to far more sunscreens than we do, or more filters at least.
Yes.
The active ingredients that do the heavy lifting in terms of protecting you from harmful radiation. And so, how does that affect this discussion? Because you're citing some international research here. I'm wondering, do we really have a limited access in a way that's a threat to our health in terms of trying to protect our skin?
In the end, the answer is no. She is correct that there are other chemicals available to use as sunscreen, though they all act in the same way. And again, I would emphasize not so much that, well, my wife is always concerned about it, and so the SPF level, sun protection factor, for her is just shy of Chernobyl in terms of its rating. And that's wholly unnecessary if you're not going to apply the sunscreen in a reasonable way. You're really supposed to put quite a bit on, and then once you go in the water, come back out, you put it back on again. So you can use up quite a bit during the course of the day, and I think people are hesitant because of their experience with shampoos where it's always lather, rinse, and repeat.
Interesting. Okay. So, well, and again, the thing that was more interesting about that is that she seemed to have a friend that worked in the cosmetic industry that was kind of irritated that she couldn't, sell certain products. So it's always public health that motivates these questions.
But then you would expect that there are other people would come by and say that these chemicals are even more toxic than the ones that are already there, and so
I know. Well, the funny thing is,
will arrive.
It's the European Union, so no one's going to be able to say, well, these are already banned in the European Union.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, getting back to the question at hand, there is sort of a strange balancing act here because you talk about some research where regulating or at least keeping vitamin D levels at an appropriate level is really important because that also apparently, if you have too low vitamin D, can
Yes.
increase your risk for certain cancers. So there is sort of this kind of need to achieve homeostasis, if you will. Maybe that's not the best term, but you understand what I'm asking. So
Yes, absolutely.
yeah, go ahead, talk about that.
Well, so it's interesting that the studies on vitamin D levels in this regard come out of Norway, where we don't have the sun all year round, so that they are a little more heightened to the low level of the vitamin D. So, as vitamin D, as we all should know, is produced by our skin on exposure to UV radiation. So there is a balance between the two. But again, you kind of have to look at where the studies are coming from to achieve that balance. And then to, I'm sure to some degree, look at your own ethnicity. I think that those of us that come from higher northern climes tend to be fairer overall and are more susceptible to, are more sensitive to the exposure to radiation. So they really need to cover up more. As we move closer to the equator and genetically we are at that point a little bit less susceptible to the effects of the sun because for millennia they've been living in an environment where there's a lot of sun beating down all the time. They're going to be at less risk. And so I think it's with everything that we always wind up talking about, everything in moderation.
Fair enough. So a little bit of sugar, a little bit of sunlight, a little bit of alcohol, and that's the way you.
Yeah. So ideally, it's a Mai Tai on the beach with a little little zinc oxide on your nose and any one of your favorite sunscreens on your legs.
There you go. Your money, baby. That's all it takes. There's a great quote here. I don't know where this is from, so maybe you can explain that. But the quote is, "We should recapture the joy of becoming tanned in the summer and of seeing happy sun-tanned children."
Yes, this came from the article by the scientists in Norway, and after talking back and forth about the risks and benefits, because the melanoma is a bigger problem, as is low vitamin D levels in those particular climes, they ended by pointing out that it would be better to go back to just having happy suntanned children and not worrying about these things, which may very, very well be the best approach.
Very good. All right. Well, one more time. The article is called "Should We Fear the Sun or Sun Protection?" Real practical story here. Sometimes we're dealing with these really grand esoteric topics about the meaning of medicine or some civilizational kind of a question. But this is pretty practical. So put on a little sunscreen and go to the beach. It's good for you. Yeah, with that, we're going to wrap up. Follow the organization on social media. It's at ACSH.org on Twitter or X, whatever you prefer to call it. I am there at CamJEnglish. You can tweet at us. Tell us what you think of the show. Ask questions, suggestions for topics. If it's interesting, we'll talk about it because we value the voice of the people here. And if you want to get a hold of Chuck, just go to our website, ACSH.org. Email is there. You can reach out to Dr. Dinnerstein, and if you have a question, he will reply to you. And with that, thank you so much. We will see you next time.